Welcome to the Security Weekly News wrap-up for the week of 19 July 2020. I know it looks like I've been sitting here since last night, and maybe I have. I'm not exactly sure, but I did move over, so I was sitting over there last night. Twitter is still hacked. Social engineering, Emotet returns. You know how much I love Emotet. Lots of data leaks. Your VPN provider is probably lying to you, and a BadPower attack might set your phone on fire. And I also get a chance to recall Forever Hack. All this and more on Security Weekly News Wrap-Up.
This is Security Weekly. For security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM.
All right. It's always fun to do the news on the day after Security Weekly. So, let's talk about what happened this week on the shows. On Application Security Weekly number 115, Mike, Matt, and John had an interview with Bhaskar Nalapatula, who's the Director of Engineering for Biarca, and Chris Rajana, who is the President and CTO of Biarca. The topic was a discussion about how security posture management and governance needs to be a part of your cloud engineering team. You would think we wouldn't have to talk about that, but you need to talk about that. It's really important. Good segment. On Business Security Weekly number 181, Paul and Matt talked with Justin Bradley, the Chief Growth Officer at Intezer. I had to actually make a note on how to say Intezer. You can hear how he said it. Matt screwed it up, but I screwed it up too. So Anyway, the segment was about whitelisting and zero trust and how to build a robust application control strategy. So this is pretty interesting stuff too, because a lot of people are talking about zero trust now, and so there's some important points there that you probably should take note of. Let's see. They didn't have a show. On the Security Weekly News, number 51, I made myself laugh introducing Jason this week. So if you didn't see that, I was making up an introduction for Jason and trying to make him laugh and made myself laugh instead. Jason Wood talked about no log VPNs leaving logs. They said they weren't logging open, so that people stole the logs that they said that weren't logged and saw the logs of the things that they said weren't being logged. Right. I will talk about the VPN stuff a little bit later, but stand up your own VPN for employees. Joff there was talking about WireGuard. Paul was talking about WireGuard last night. I was talking about OpenVPN, which is one that I use. They're both reliable. They're both cheap, and you control the endpoint. So, you could do that. On Security and Compliance Weekly number 36, Jeff, John, Josh, and Scott had a PCI Dream Team segment, and they had one too. Arthur Cooper, the senior security consultant at Newarks, Ben Rothka, the senior information security specialist at Tapad, David Mundink, the principal security consultant at Herjavec Group. It was like the week of names and companies that are hard to say when you were on Security Weekly last night. And Jeff Hall, the senior consultant at Wesby Associates. That was quite a dream team lineup of tongue twisters too. The second segment was just more of the same, and they had a long discussion about PCI. So I'm sure Jeff was like as giddy as a schoolgirl on that segment. So you should check that out. You know how Jeff is. On Paul's Security Weekly number 659, I don't know if I'll live long enough to be on another Fibonacci number. I think the next Fibonacci number on Paul's Security Weekly is 944. I think that would be the next Fibonacci number But 6:59, I was on. Yeah, it was fun. The first segment was with our friend Zane Lackey from Signal Science, and we had a really good chat about COVID-19. And Zane is a real expert in the field on a lot of things, and a worldwide respected expert on all sorts of stuff. But we were talking about COVID-19 and how the movement into the cloud, and I might actually inject the word abrupt movement into the cloud, and just externalizing all your applications, whether you moved them to the cloud or not, has accelerated due to work from home, and some thoughts on how you might fix that. Zane's always a great guest, and we had a lot to talk about there, and everybody's facing this sort of problem. So it's definitely a segment worth taking a listen to or watching. If you want to see it, see the actual video excitement. In the second segment, Sumedh Thakar, the president and chief product officer at Qualys, joined us for more discussion about patching and managing resources in the cloud. And Sumedh's always a great guest as well. He's been on before, and we always like to talk to him. And the thing that he made, and there was a whole bunch of quotes that Sumedh put out last night that you could probably have put on posters about SEC. But he was talking about managing 1,000 developers, and I was like, 1,000 developers? Yeah, I managed 8 developers once, and it got ugly. But we even got to say Lambda a bunch of times in that segment. So if you're interested in cloud stuff and issues around all that, it was a great segment and fun to talk with Sumedh every time. And, of course, we had the news, which went on for quite a while. We had fun, and we had bottles of scotch and all that kind of stuff. So, how can you go wrong? My favorite thread of the week is going to be, I did social engineering last week, and that's probably still my favorite threat, but we talked about that. So I'll talk about step 2 in the kill chain. What if we just forget social engineering? I mean, I know everybody went, whoa, did he just say that? But if we just assume that an infinite series social engineering is going to work, and I actually have been pretty much in that camp since the 1980s, and if you watched last week, you heard me talking about that. Somebody always takes the bait. I mean, you can maybe not the first person or the second person, but the nth person is going to take the bait. So that means maybe the first step in an actual kill chain is going to be something else, because if that's the first step, we haven't done very well at stopping it, and we've been trying to stop that kind of stuff for a long, long time. So how does the thing that happens in the social engineering actually move past the point of that new guy clicked the link, and it moves from there to, Mother, this is Ripley, scuttle the ship. I can't do her voice. But the real impact is what happens after the link is clicked, and not the pretty much given that the link will get clicked, even though we direct so many resources towards that not getting the link clicked, and it just doesn't work. But if you don't want to see that, I did talk about that last week on episode 50. So what is the fatal flaw that unleashes the pain? Well, when I start thinking about that kill chain, I really start thinking about the blast radius. So when I talk to people about this, I talk about blast radius a lot. And what I mean is that if Sid clicks a link, how far does it go? If it just stops right there on that one local machine, that sucks for Sid, but, everybody else is kind of like, poor Sid, he's screwed. But, run the backup and you're good. And the impact ends up being low. But if it's in a large network with privileges, then that blast that Sid unleashes may take out the whole company and all their backups and everything surrounding it. Large homogeneous networks with little granular control are common, and they are big, juicy targets for everything from, exfiltration to ransomware, and usually it's a combination of those things. And so if we release something in that big, flat, homogeneous network, it's just like tossing a stick of dynamite into the dynamite warehouse. And all too often, companies have little or they have no control at all at a granular level, and they don't manage user accounts very well, and all those users may have local administrator privilege. They may have PowerShell privileges, often they have PowerShell privileges, which allows the execution of things like Mimikatz. And even if they don't have local administrator privilege, they may be able to allow lateral movement to find something that will. And so, basically your company gets hosed by ransomware. You got to focus on that second step in the kill chain, and I could go on and on about this, but, I've been going on and on about it for a long time, and it hasn't done any good. So maybe it's just, but I'm not going to give up. And now the top news from all the shows. Oh, let's keep doing the Twitter story. I mean, you kind of want the Twitter story to maybe go away, but it isn't going away, and there's still a lot of interest in this Twitter story. So if you've been under a rock, which you probably haven't, you might have missed that Twitter got hacked last week. Everybody covered the story. It was on every major blog. It was on the news. It was on Security Weekly. We talked about it everywhere. But the story kind of keeps expanding and contracting. So basically what happened was a social engineering, read phishing attack, was able to compromise not just some basic users, but some internal Twitter users that apparently those internal users were running with way too much privilege, like we often see. And we're to blame as many times as this. I run as root, you run as root. We sit there and we run with local admin privilege because we're, the IT and security people. And so the attackers were basically advertising on a bulletin board that they could reset any email associated with a Twitter account, any Twitter account. I think they were charging like $300 for that. And that they could give you access, like full access to any verified account you want. And that the price they were quoting was like $2,000 to $3,000, depending on, I guess, how famous it was. Get them now while the getting's good, because once we sell them all out, there won't be any more. So anyway, a verified Twitter account, and I got a lot of calls about people asking me to explain this to them. A verified Twitter account just means that at some point in time, Twitter verified the user, owner of that account, and said, yes, that is Elon Musk. They have different mechanisms for verifying accounts, and there's all these criteria for how to get a verified account. And for a while, it was this really popular hip thing to try to get one. You had to have so many followers, you had to have so many tweets, you had all these different things. And then, you had to provide identity. Facebook is doing this now. You can get a verified Facebook account. But all that means is that at some point in time, they verified the user. So Twitter approved it, put the little check mark on it, and all of a sudden you're a big shot. The attack focused on big name verified accounts and appeared to develop into a Bitcoin scam. So it's not clear exactly what the objective here was. Was it just getting people to give Bitcoin to this site? So accounts like Barack Obama and Elon Musk and Bill Gates and on and on and on basically tweeted asking people for donations to this Bitcoin account. And these are verified accounts. So theoretically, when people saw these requests, I guess, because it came from a verified account, some people went and donated money to the Bitcoin wallet before it got shut down. And other accounts so there was like 140, I think, total accounts. I had that in the story last week about how many there were. But these verified accounts were tweeting about donating Bitcoin. And then there were other accounts involved in this that were a combination of not so famous people, unverified accounts, and so forth. But they had all their Twitter information dumped. So the Twitter tool that lets you dump all the personal information, like your telephone number, your two-factor authentication number, your email address, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, were dumped. And then in 36 of the accounts now, Twitter has revealed that their private DMs, so their direct messages, were actually reviewed and possibly downloaded. So I don't know what was in those private messaging stashes. I'm sure a lot of people would be interested in reading Elon Musk's private messages or Barack Obama's private messages. So basically, who knows what all has been exploited here. The total Bitcoin that was believably in the low six figures, but now there is $1 million bounty out on information leading to the attackers. So Twitter, obviously, or I don't know if Twitter put that bounty out or somebody else put the bounty out, but so hey, now they got dead or alive posters put up for the people that did this. And I was sort of wondering last night, were the attackers going to just sort of maybe turn each other in to try to get the bounty? I mean, they obviously get more money from the bounty than they got from the Bitcoin. But maybe there was other objectives there as well. The really scary thing about that is that, once again, social engineering led to an account that had too much privilege, which allowed all this to happen. Twitter has been very closed-mouthed about it and releasing only boilerplate type statements. Thanks to Sniper for this story. 2 Chinese hackers working for the Ministry of State of the People's Republic of China, the Ministry of State Security of People's Republic of China, were charged with global computer intrusion campaign targeting intellectual property, including COVID-19 research. There was an 11-count indictment against Li Xiaoyu and Dong Jiaxi, allegedly conducting a hacking campaign across at least 10 years that targeted the United States, pretty much everybody that had high-tech industry, so from Sweden to the UK, Germany, on and on and on. Basically, they were grabbing whatever they could grab from what I could read in the story. This is not something new. The Soviet Union, which doesn't exist anymore, and China have for a long, long time conducted these sorts of operations. Even before the internet, they were out there trying to steal intellectual property. So that meant that if the Chinese government put spies in the United States who were trying, I was trained on this back in like the 1980s. When I had a clearance, and they were telling us about how you might be approached by certain parties who would be trying to get you to give them blueprints, plans, schedules, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they've been doing this for a long time. And this seemed to be a state-sponsored version of it that was running on the internet. So they were just breaking in and extracting. There's also, though, apparently in the claim, there was notation in there about extortion. They were telling people they would reveal things that they had developed if they didn't pay up for ransoms and so forth. So they may be financing their operation like that, the very common North Korean tactic to do that sort of stuff. And COVID-19 development was also being targeted. My impression of that was just part of the overall plan to gather intellectual property. So if somebody's working on a virus vaccine, why not steal that too? You're stealing the plans for, Chevrolet, GM cars was a thing they used to steal. Tanks, airplanes, whatever, they steal the plans and then they produce it over there. Pretty typical, and I don't know that there was anything really dramatically new here, but it was another indictment of hackers. The original activity was discovered at the Department of Energy Hanford site, which is another one of those lab sites that, like where I used to work, that is located in Washington State. It's not clear that I don't think they arrested the 2 people. They just filed an indictment in Washington court for those individuals if they ever get their hands on them. So, they probably should not come to DEF CON and that kind of thing. The New York State Department of Financial Services has filed charges against a title insurance provider for exposing millions of customer documents that contain personal information. This was the first time that what is called Part 500 Title 23 in New York State was actually used. They passed this legislation in March of 2017, but they had not actually charged anyone with it. First American, which is based in Nebraska, writes title insurance policies. And if you've ever bought a house or anything that required title insurance, you know that title insurance pretty much has everything about you down to your shoe size and the color of your toenail polish. So from October 2014 to May 2019, the charges claim First American's public-facing website would allow anyone to view customer information contained in that database. First American stated that only a small number of records was actually viewed out of the hundreds of millions of records that were actually available in this database. Not sure how either side is going to prove how many records were viewed. Maybe they have evidence on that, maybe they don't. First American obviously saying not many were viewed. The charges probably say a lot were viewed. The penalty for this under this legislation can represent up to $1,000 per violation, and there were roughly 753 million records. So, it could be a little pricey if they manage to make these charges stick. At the same time, another web leak at Family Tree Maker, which is a product for doing genealogy. I knew about it because my dad used to use it when he used to work on genealogy and stuff. But basically, an Elasticsearch server was exposed to the internet. We see that over and over again. That's why I included here. The open and unencrypted server exposed 25 gigs of ancestry data and subscription data, which included all kinds of stuff personally. So basically, if you have an outward-facing resource, you probably should secure it. I mean, even if it's only internal, you should secure it. So when people put up these web servers and they don't secure things, that's the way this works. Emotet, which has had a 5-month hiatus, has resurfaced and sent 250,000 mal spam messages worldwide to Microsoft Office users. And that started last Friday. Emotet is an old framework. It's been around since about 2014. It occasionally goes on vacation. And then resurfaces with new tools and new modeling. Basically, I was ranting about all this stuff earlier, but Emotet is attached to a link, and the email runs a PowerShell script, which downloads payloads from a command and control server. Pretty much the standard approach these days for all these frameworks. And again, somebody will click the link or open the attachment. Emotet has a framework capability that can be customized to download various different pieces of ransomware or other malware, which allows for compromise, exfiltration, ransomware, you name it. It's very typical of modern malware frameworks. This one apparently is dropping Quackbot instead of TrickBot. And then Quackbot can be used to steal information from the local network. And of course, you can pretty much do whatever you want once you're in at that level. And you can have Quackbot drop ransomware as you go out. I always talk about people throwing a grenade over their shoulder when they go out the door. And that's kind of what I see a lot of this stuff doing. I go in, I steal a bunch of stuff. I don't want anybody to see that I was stealing stuff. So I just ransomware the whole place on my way out the door. And if I get paid for that too, why not? A number of VPN firms got called out this week. When COVID-19 first started sending people home, there was a run on VPN services driven by all the new work from home users. Likewise, when that net neutrality bill was passed back in December of 2017, a lot of people started asking, was the ISP going to start tracking them and deciding what priority they were, what they were doing, and so on and so forth. And the VPN is a big market. So there was a lot of marketing for different VPN services, from free ones to pay ones and so on and so forth. All this has been emerging about how the VPN would protect your information. Now remember, VPN is only as good as the endpoints. So your data is exposed on the front end before it goes into the VPN, and it's exposed on the back end when it gets on the VPN host. So when it exits the VPN tunnel, it's still exposed. So whatever you're doing is trackable there, which is probably why you should build your own VPN, like I said earlier. Well, UFO VPN makes a big deal in their advertising about not collecting user data or logging user activity, but the Hong Kong-based service recently exposed 20 million user logs, which apparently would indicate that they may actually indeed be logging what you're doing. PureVPN was another one that claimed that it does not keep user logs. They're adamant about that, but they did then provide those logs to the FBI when it was requested. It's pretty easy to write marketing statements saying, I don't log anything, we don't track you, we don't do anything. It's a lot harder to actually do those things, especially if you're doing business in China or the endpoint is located in China and Hong Kong is in China. Somebody asked me that the other day. They said, isn't Hong Kong separate from China? It was, but it's not anymore. And that China has recently cracked down on Hong Kong and trying to bring it closer to the behavior in the mainland China. So check your VPNs or roll your own, even better. A new attack called Meow has been running so far 1,000 unsecured databases have been permanently deleted, leaving only the word meow in its place. I don't know if this is from Super Troopers or what. This was the first note of this attack came from this UFO VPN log release scandal, and it turned out that UFO VPN was also caught up in one of these meow attacks and had dumped all this uncollected user information on the internet. There is no ransomware or anything else in the meow attack. It appears to be one of those really classic kind of hacking attacks, which I call the because I can variety. And years ago, I investigated one of these with a company in the People's Republic of China a very long time ago. It was called Forever Hack. Did something very similar to what Meow does, which it went through your web server or your database server and replaced something. In that case, it replaced all of them with a single file called Forever Hack. This one replaces everything with a file name that just includes the word meow. So, I mean, that's a pretty classic kind of hack sort of story. And finally, I was on the story a lot. I didn't get a lot of traction. It's just kind of a fun story to me. BadPower is the name of a firmware attack that was demonstrated by Xuanwu Labs, which is located at Tencent Games. They provided a video of the attack. I did put that in the wiki, and they released information that they were able to successfully attack the firmware of 18 out of 35 fast chargers. and cause a charger to deliver way more voltage, like 2 or 3 times more than it was supposed to, and that could be quite a bit of voltage. Some of those could go up to 12 or even 20 volts. And so, suddenly blasting the whatever's being charged with a lot more voltage than it was supposed to. It was already getting hit with more voltage than it was really designed for, right? Because it's on a fast charger, and then like tripling that could really get ugly. And in some of the cases that they included in their video, some of the devices melted, bent, flexed, and or burst into flames. So quite an interesting attack. The attack, though, not to get everybody worried, the attack is very lab-oriented, and it wasn't something that could be done remotely. They were doing it by having access to the firmware charger. And that's the news wrap-up for the week of 19 July 2020 in the time of plague. I'm Doug White from the RD Online Cybersecurity Program at Roger Williams University. We'll see you next week on the network that never sleeps, Security Weekly. Read the science.